Spouses play a critical role in our Air Force and certainly are a major part of our Air Force family. They serve and sacrifice alongside their airmen and are also our airmen for life. It is my pleasure to introduce a very special guest to you today, our speaker, Brittany Boccher, National Military Spouse of the Year. I'm going to turn it over to Brittany for her remarks. So thank you, Brittany.
Okay, let's see here. All right, thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon. Like she said, my name is Brittany Boccher, and I'm the 2017 Armed Forces Insurance Military Spouse of the Year. I'm an Air Force spouse of 12 years, a mother of 2, which one has special needs, a small business owner, a founder of a nonprofit, volunteer, and advocate. Before we get started, how many in the room are military spouses? Okay, take a look around this room. Look at the faces of the people who have their hands held up. This is the face of today's military spouse. We are women and we are men, and we make a great community. We are so different, yet we all share one common bond, and that is that we all, without any difference, are a military spouse at the end of the day. So let's get started. Today we're going to talk about missiles. Now, I'm just kidding, but if you read your program, it says that I work on missiles, but I don't. So we're actually going to speak about what I refer to as resiliency, identity, and challenges, and how these affect and empower today's military spouse. Our military spouses need preparedness just like our uniformed service members. As stated this morning by the Secretary of the Air Force, we need to restore readiness to win any fight, anytime, and this includes our military spouses. When I heard that this morning, it resonated so well with me because I feel military spouses need to be prepared and trained in the topic of resiliency, just like our uniformed service member. So empowering military spouses, I ask you, how do we empower each other and how do we empower today's military spouse? This seems like a pretty simple question, but I have found that it's like an onion and there are many layers to the answer. Who are you? So let's talk about identity of the military spouse. Specifically, how do we characterize a military spouse? Over the years, I've had the opportunity to speak to numerous military spouses, and I always ask them how you describe or characterize a military spouse. So help me out. Tell me words that describe today's military spouse. Awesome. What was it? Flexible, resilient. Okay, so these are some great words, and these are some of the other words that come up when I speak to military spouses. And if you look at these words, it really paints a beautiful picture of today's military spouse. So, what's different is how do you see yourself? So let's switch gears for a moment and discuss how we characterize ourselves. What's interesting is when I talk to military spouses, how different the characterization is when you ask someone to describe themselves versus describing how they see the entire military spouse population. When I turn the question around and I ask spouses, how do you describe yourself? It's oftentimes like crickets in the room. It's as if there's an identity crisis as to how we see other military spouses and how we see ourselves. Does this resonate with anyone in this room, or have you experienced that with fellow military spouses? Anybody? Maybe. Another part of identity is figuring out who we are and how we label ourselves. For example, I have found myself many times saying, I'm Brittany, I'm Adam's wife, and I'm just a stay-at-home mom. I've said that numerous times over my 12-year lifespan as a military spouse. Then my inner self says, whoa, what are you talking about? You're just a stay-at-home mom? And what I realize, it's the just, that word, just, and that's how we label ourselves. And so some of the common labels that I hear military spouses say is, I'm just a stay-at-home mom, or I just work from home, I just work at XYZ, the child care center, or anything else. Or maybe it's, I'm just going to school right now, or I'm just a volunteer advocate in my community. So I'm going to tell you a little story. In 2007, my husband returned from a deployment, and I moved to our first duty station in Columbus, Mississippi. And if any of you have been to Columbus, Mississippi, we have a relationship here with that. you know that that's a pretty good move to take. It's in the middle of nowhere, and the nearest target's in another state. So before moving to Mississippi, I labeled myself as a nonprofit executive. I had worked in the nonprofit industry, and I had goals and aspirations that were in reach to me. However, love happened in an airport one day, and 6 months later, I marry this man who's so dedicated to the military. And I find myself quitting my job and relocating to Columbus, Mississippi, where the job market was pretty much non-existent for at least my type of employment. So for the first time in my professional career, I'm unemployed, and I'm in a new state. I have no friends, brand new to the military, have left my family, and my husband is working extremely long hours. Eventually, over time, I found employment, which for me was underemployment. And I became pretty bitter and resentful during that time. The assignment, however, after moving on and reflecting years ago, I realized how important that assignment was for preparing me to be here today. You see, I took a job as a director of a preschool, making half the income I was used to making, and I knew there was absolutely no opportunity for growth for me at that time. I also had no idea how long we were going to be in Columbus, Mississippi. However, I had the ability to hire teachers while I was employed at this preschool. And during that time, I was able to hire over 8 military spouses to hire them as teachers for our preschool. And I realized that I was more than just a director of a preschool. I was a leader, and I provided opportunities to fellow military spouses and with their challenge of unemployment. And I also had the opportunity daily to motivate, inspire, and encourage them. So not only did they have a job, but they came to a place where I was passionate to make sure they furthered their education. They utilized programs that were available to continue certifications so that when they went to their next base, they were prepared to maybe teach elementary school, middle school, or high school. What I learned over time is the labels we put on ourselves are just that. They're labels. They don't truly depict who we are and what we were doing. So I encourage you today, I also challenge you to accept what you're doing today and understand that it's a season. It's just a season, and it's going to pass. So maybe today you are in your right now job. Maybe it's not your forever job and it's not your dream job, but it's your right now job, and it's a stepping stone to getting you to your forever job or whatever it may be that you're wanting to do. Okay, let's talk now about challenges. So no one in this room has experienced any challenges, I'm sure. No challenges, no struggles. Military life as a spouse is wonderful, and we're good, right? Okay. As a military spouse, we face many challenges, and these are different than our civilian non-military counterparts. Actually, the challenges are significantly different just for the military spouses that are in this room today. However, at the end of the day, it's important to recognize that your challenge and my challenge is relative to one another. So while you may think that mine takes more precedent over you, no two challenge takes precedent over each other. They're challenges, and we have to overcome them. Let me be honest, I'm guilty of not asking for help when I'm struggling because I put in my mind that the military spouse next to me has a challenge that's more significant, and that's the person who really needs the help, and that I don't. This is extremely dangerous, the mindset, and it's something that we as military spouses must overcome. We spouses need to focus on our physical, mental, and emotional wellness because it's critical in supporting the mission of our military. We wear multiple hats, and oftentimes we're wearing them at the same time. We do a lot of work behind the scenes so that our service member is able to perform their duties in the military. While we are not active service members, we work with the military, adding in the overall success of the mission. I consider myself an extremely unique military spouse, but then again, what is really typical? My spouse is a special agent for the Office of Special Investigations. It sounds really crazy. The first time I called his office and he answered the phone while we were dating as Special Agent Brittany Boccher, I hung up because I was extremely intimidated and did not know what to say to him. This particular career field is a challenge in itself because There's really no internal spouse group, at least that I'm aware of, for this particular career field. And there's no key spouse program to say for this. So it's oftentimes lonely, and that encourages me even more to get out, meet spouses, especially base-wide spouses group, and to get involved. Okay, let's talk about challenges that we know we're all facing and struggles that we might face in the future. So can anyone tell me, any military spouses here, tell me some of the challenges that you're facing today or you foresee facing in the near future? Employment, career growth. Anybody else? Loneliness. Okay, so some of the, I don't have a slide for this, but some of the things that military spouses tell me that are challenges for them is childcare, spouse employment, underemployment, emotional support, fear of change, separation, TDY, and deployments, education for self, and worry of education for their children, family support system, isolation, lack of social relationships, lack of stability, and reintegration. So I would like to share my personal challenge. There's many that I could have shared, but I hope this one may resonate with all of you. 2.5 years ago, a neonatologist walked into my hospital room and informed me that my son had Down syndrome. My world was literally stunned in that moment. We had no idea that our son was going to be born with any disability. I could see movement from everyone in my room. I could hear nothing that they were saying. For 36 hours, my husband and I were completely silent. We did not call family. We did not post on social media or share any information about our son because we did not know how to share him with the world. A genetic counselor came in to speak to us and said, "Congratulations, you have a beautiful son. Take him home and raise him like your other children, but just don't expect much." There's the word "just" again. In the days, weeks, and months following, we learned our son also had nystagmus, which is a disorder of the eyes, plagiocephaly. His skull was not shaped correctly, and his brain did not have room for growth. Torticollis, laryngomalacia, and tracheomalacia, which are both breathing disorders that would allow him to stop breathing on his own at any point. 2 holes in his heart, and an immunoglobulin deficiency disorder called B-cell lymphopenia, just to name a few of his secondary diagnoses. I felt defeated, and most of all, I felt scared. How would I raise this child, especially living the life we live in the military? I feared if we would have appropriate doctors, support groups, access to care, education, and resources, not to mention the stress of relocating and ensuring the same quality and continuity of care for him. Then throw in the future of deployments and single parenting. How would this work? Saying I was overwhelmed is an understatement, and if it wasn't enough, I feared life as a family and employment and career progression for my uniformed service member. So a lot of the times when I work with the Exceptional Family Member Program, I find that a lot of people are reluctant to enroll in the program when they should. A lot of the concerns is that if I enroll in this program, it's going to limit where my family can move, which is going to limit the job that the uniformed service member can do, and is that going to mess with career progression? For me, if we are not in a location that can support the needs of my child, then as a family, we are not prepared, and my husband is not mission ready. So it's very important to be in a location that can support the needs of my family. Now, don't get me wrong, I grieved. Oh, sorry, let me back up. The fears consumed me for weeks, if not months, and then I met this military spouse, this absolutely amazing military spouse, who had a daughter with Down syndrome that was 4 years old at the time. And she said to me, "Brittany, you've got this. You have everything that you need. And if there's something that you don't have, you are going to find a way to find it." She told me that you are his mom, you are his caregiver now, and you are his voice, and you will find a way. She reminded me that I was chosen out of all the people in this world to be his parent. I've been entrusted with him for the rest of his life. He is this amazing human being, by the way. I wish I had a picture of him. In that moment, I was empowered by this military spouse. I was motivated and I was inspired, and I knew my why and my purpose. So now, don't get me wrong, I grieved. I mourned a child that was very much alive. And I picked myself up and became a voice for my son and for people who have disabilities, as well as a voice for caregivers of dependents in the military, as well as veterans who are injured. I educated myself about the Air Force Exceptional Family Member Program, and I self-appointed myself as a parent liaison on my base. They really knew when I was walking in that building that I had a mission to get something done, and I wasn't going to leave without an answer. And sometimes, just to tell you spouses, sometimes the answer may not be what you want. And it's okay to accept that, because at least you know that you tried, you've discussed what needs to be done, you've recommended an improvement, and now you have an answer as to why or why not this may or may not be done for you. The Exceptional Family Member Program is a phenomenal program, but like any program in the world, there's room for improvement. I worked with our base to identify resources for our son, programs to reduce caregiver stress, and ways to utilize insurance to obtain equipment that was much needed for my child. I learned that TRICARE has a secondary program called TRICARE Echo, and it's a phenomenal program that allows my son to stand. He's unable to stand, he's unable to talk, but with the equipment provided through EFMP, through TRICARE Echo, he can stand. He now has some wheels, so we're teaching him to roll. And these are things he would not have access to if it wasn't for these programs. I started an apparel company as a way to solve my employment challenges. Before having my son, I was in the nonprofit world. I was an executive, felt like I was doing things, had goals and aspirations. When he was born, I realized my primary focus was to stay at home and raise him and ensure that he had every resource available to him to be successful. Starting an apparel company allowed me to work from home, fully work from home, bring in an income that would help offset some of the costs of the equipment and services that he needed, as well as gave me a platform to reach out to every individual that purchased an item from us. When we send a package out, there's a card in each package that has a different fact about Down syndrome and military spouses as a way to advocate and bring awareness to our community. Most importantly, I asked my base what they could do for my family, and I asked for a seat at the table to discuss programs and resources for families with special needs. You see, I had to ask for these services. If I hadn't sought out services, I would not be standing here today. If I can give advice to any military spouse, don't complain about a service that you don't think is available. Ask if the service is available. If it's not available, make a recommendation so that in the future it can be looked upon and see if it's a potential that can be made happen. If we don't bring these topics up to the people in control who can make decisions, they will never know that the problem exists. Then one sunny afternoon, I found myself on a playground on our base, and I had both children with me. I also have a 4-year-old. And I realized my son had no opportunities for play. I watched my daughter run towards the swings and slides, and she had this amazing smile on her face, and she was so happy. And as I turned around, I realized my son's limitations for the first time. He was bound to a stroller with the inability to play, socialize, learn, and develop relationships. At that moment, sadness overcame me, and inside, a fire ignited, and I pursued the Family Advocacy Office on base and identified the playground as an area for improvement. After 6 months of me walking up and down the hallway a lot at Little Rock Air Force Base, they unveiled a special needs 5-point harness high back swing for children of all abilities. I'm happy to say I see this swing utilized on a daily basis from children with and without a disability. And it's amazing when a family comes up to me who has a child with a disability and says, for the first time, I can take my child out to play with other kids. I want to remove the barrier for our children. Not all bases need this. There are bases that are EFMP heavy, and on those installations, our children should not have that barrier. They need to have the inclusion And if we think back to when we were kids, we can probably remember the time on the playground, the friends that we made, the relationships that were fostered, and how we grew. I could have complained about this playground. I could have complained to anyone that would have listened to me and given me their ear, but instead I sought out resources and I educated myself, and with prepared thoughts, I went to our family advocacy office. We have an abundant amount of resources as a military spouse. We just need to seek these resources. So if my second bit of information, seek resources because they are there. We have so much at our disposal, we just don't know about it. And it's not the military's responsibility to give us all these resources. We need to take responsibility for ourselves and seek out these resources. There are many other challenges I could have shared with you today, but I hope this resonates more with you than any of the other ones that I could have shared. The point of this is to let you know the challenge that I have may sound greater than the challenge that you face, but like I said before, no challenge is more prevalent than the other. At the end of the day, it's still a challenge, and how it affects you and me is probably the same. Okay. Finally, talking about preparedness and resiliency. So we've probably all heard this. Your spouse leaving tomorrow on a no-notice TDY or a deployment, and you're wondering if you're prepared. Or maybe, just like recently, we have hurricanes hitting our coastal areas, and maybe it's devastated your life, and you just realize, I'm not prepared. The uniformed service member is not the only person in the home that needs training tools and resources to be prepared. We need to be prepared too. Now, I don't have time to talk about all the forms of preparedness, but I do want to take time to talk about emotional preparedness and resiliency, because this is our specific capacity to recover quickly from challenges and difficulties. Without emotional preparedness, we are unable to be prepared in any other way, to include financial preparedness and emergency preparedness. How can you, as a military spouse, be emotionally prepared? One thing is take care of yourself. No, I don't mean nails, haircut, massage. That's not what I'm talking about, even though those things are absolutely wonderful, and I would take that up anytime. But I'm referring to taking care of yourself by developing a daily routine, focusing on your emotional, mental, and physical well-being, staying active, getting to the gym, eating healthy. All of those are extremely important to taking care of yourself. If you are not taking care of yourself, how are you going to take care of your family? And we know our military spouse is the backbone of our military family. Find a sense of purpose. Okay, remember early in my story, I identified the moment that I found my purpose. And that was when my son was born, and I realized we were going to have all of these challenges to overcome. So find your purpose, because typically when you find your purpose, that is when you become that like grit in you, and you will fight for something, you will research something, you'll find a way. Think positive in your abilities. So be confident in yourself and know that there's absolutely no challenge too big for you to overcome. Develop a network and don't do it alone. This is probably one of the most important things. When military families, when one member deploys, I see a lot of military spouses become like a recluse. They won't ask anyone for help, and that's when it just kind of spirals out of control. And at that point, when the family is spiraling, the uniformed service member who is downrange is not focused on their mission. So join groups. Get involved in spouses club, mom's group, kids play group. Just remember, it takes a village, and this could not be more true for our military families. As we speak right now, my husband's at home with our 2 kids. My son's sick, and I have 2 neighbors who are helping baths, food, picking up from school. So it takes more than one person. So really identify your village and who can help you. Embrace change. This is really difficult for a lot of people, but as a military spouse, we need to have the ability to embrace change. When orders arrive to a move or deployment, look for the positive instead of dwelling on the negative. Believe me, I've been in Altus, Oklahoma, Columbus, Mississippi. as well as wonderful places like California and Colorado. So instead of dwelling on it, you know it's going to happen. Don't focus on the negative while you're there. Focus on the positive, because you have no idea what opportunity may present itself when you're in that location. Be optimistic. Look at situations full of optimism and positivity. This goes a long way, even not being a military spouse. As just being an individual, if you wake up in the morning and you have a good thought about the day, you are more than likely going to have a good day. But if you wake up in the morning and all you think about is every negative thing or bad thing in your life, you're going to be pretty hard-pressed to get through that day with any bit of happiness in your life. Develop problem-solving skills. When a challenge arises, don't panic. Make the choice that your challenge will not overcome you. We have the ability to make choices like this. Don't allow it to overcome you. Instead, find the resources to help you overcome that challenge. And establish goals. It's easier to move forward when you know you have something you're working towards. So if we're getting up every day and we have no end goal in sight, it's really hard to get through the day. So just make sure if a deployment comes up or an assignment, have goals. Have a goal during that, what you may consider a terrible assignment. Maybe you want to learn something new about yourself, develop a new skill, but identify something. These are just a few tips that can help you become emotionally prepared, and it's what gets me through the day each day. I would recommend that you contact your individual base, and if you are Air Force, which I'm assuming we all are, I would suggest you reach out to the Airmen and Family Readiness Center to identify if military spouse resiliency training or any other type of program might be available to you. So that is all I have. If you want information, you can reach me, and any questions. Oh.
Wow, that was very inspirational. I see why Ms. Brittany was recognized as the Spouse of the Year. So round of applause again, because that really was an incredible presentation. So thank you. Let's see, a few questions here. Okay. First question, you talked about resources for spouses, and you talked about finding meaningful work relevant to their expertise. I mean, what particular resources would you recommend to spouses? You mentioned a bunch of them in your speech, but is there one that you find that has really helped you specifically regarding spouse employment and regarding resources on the medical side too for your son?
So for spouse employment, I really encourage military spouses to look at national resources as well as the AFRC to see what opportunities are there. I encourage them to identify their skills that they have from whatever it is that they've been doing. So one of the problems a lot of spouses come to me and say is, I've been at home for 5 years. I don't have anything to put on my resume. And that's where I talk to them and help them identify what transferable skills they have that they can now put on their resume, because once again, you're not just a stay-at-home mom. You've been doing finances, you're communicating, you are, planning things, you're a chauffeur, maybe you're an excellent cook. I'm not, but that could be something that you are. So I encourage them to reach out to the AFRC and use resume building classes, but then I also encourage them to utilize nonprofits in the area. There are an abundant amount of nonprofits for military families and spouses. And really using these resources, I cannot drive home enough to military spouses to use the resources available to them on the base, because if we don't use them, they will not be there. They will think that the need's not there if they're not utilized. So that's mainly what I tell them.
Great, thank you. You talked a lot about empowerment and the impact an empowered spouse has in the home and community. Talk a little bit more about on particular communities and what spouses can do to feel empowered and to share that with other spouses.
So currently in the Little Rock Air Force Base community where I'm at, I operate the Consolidated Spouses Club, and I have an opportunity to meet a lot of spouses, give them encouragement, and try to inspire them to do things in our community. One of the ways that I do this is I listen to them. I listen, I take notes, I journal, and then I try to find them opportunities and give them those opportunities, help them make that connection, and then tell them it's on you to follow through with this. But it's really that encouragement piece and providing them those opportunities. One of the other things I do as the president of our club, I allow other members of our board purposely to lead our meetings. I will either have something I have to do or bow out early because I want to give them an opportunity to learn how to operate a board meeting, how to make a motion at a board meeting, how to do things correctly, give them the opportunity and skills, and then put them in front of people who you never know who they're going to be in front of and who they might make a connection with. So really providing them those opportunities and realizing kind of some of their strengths that maybe they're not recognizing and helping them.
Thank you. The panel, 2 panels before this, we talked a lot about the resources that are available and some of the special initiatives on spouse employment and I think the woman one source. What's your, do you feel personally as a military spouse that a lot of these initiatives are making headway in some of the issues that spouses maybe have experienced throughout the years?
I absolutely think that all of these initiatives are making headway. I think the biggest problem is the communication piece, is getting this information to the spouses so that they will utilize the resources. That's the million-dollar question. How do we get the information in their hands? And then at that point, you can take the horse to the water. You can't make them drink. So hopefully they'll utilize the services. But I do think that they're making headway.
Great. I think they need someone like you to take them by the hand and take them to the water. You talked earlier about waking up every day with a positive attitude, and one of the questions here was how does Brittany define success? And I think your positive attitude, maybe that's the answer there, but over to you to address that question.
So if I would have answered this question 10 years ago, it would look a lot different. And today I realize that success is at the end of the day if I am completely content with what I'm doing and if I'm happy. It has absolutely nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with a title, a position, anything like that. It's really based on, what you think when you wake up, how you, feel about yourself, that positive thinking. That's success for me. So I may never go back to a nonprofit and be an executive, and I'm okay with that because I feel pretty successful at the end of the day.
That's great. I guess the last question, unless there's any other questions from the audience, looking back on your life as a military spouse, these past few years, bouncing across from different assignments, some in nice locations, some in not so nice locations, any regrets?
So my regret is when I was a very young military spouse, I dug my heels in. I probably, like many of the military spouses here, were like, I'm not going. I am not going there. It's not happening. Not going. And all that did was cause friction because at the end of the day, I knew we were going. Like, there's no way around it. We're going. And so all of that friction that it caused was so unnecessary in my marriage, and what it caused, for my spouse, the stress for him knowing, like, I'm the one who has to go here. I'm pulling, our family to go to this location. So if I wouldn't have dug my heels in, and at the time, I wish I would have had a mentor who was really helping me along. So if I could tell anyone, any military spouse, find a mentor. Find someone who's been in your shoes longer than you and let them lead you, provide you information.
Great. Are there any other further questions? Here, please.
Honestly, I find that doing smaller events tend to get more spouses to come out. So things that are a little more intimate, and maybe it's not like an entire base-wide thing, that you'll get more spouses, and then it's word of mouth. Because if you can get 20 spouses to come to a small event, and those 20 spouses have a really positive experience and learn from that, then they're going to go back into their community and say, if they do this again, you really need to come. And with the spouse community, that's really it. It's that word of mouth. So maybe it's starting on, for us, it's like a unit or squadron level, whatever it is, and going specific to that location and doing something. One thing that I would say is our base likes to use the term newcomers briefing. And for a military spouse, the word briefing turns them off automatically because they assume that that is for their uniformed service members, so they don't go. And so for years, this is what's happened. This kind of same thing happens in the EF&P community. When I first went to our base for EF&P, I was curious what was available to my family. And I had asked the EF&P coordinator at the time what they were offering. And the programs that they were offering were programs that were not really conducive to a family with special needs, like a fishing tournament. Not really something a child wheelchair bound that maybe can't tolerate heat going outside in Arkansas is probably not the best solution. So I asked them, have you done a community needs assessment? Which they had not. And basically they were offering programs, but they had no idea what their population needed or wanted. So they were offering programs of which people didn't want those programs. And so knowing what your spouses need, and I think that's really regional to your base. What you guys need at Barksdale is different than what we're going to need up at Little Rock, more than likely.
Actually, this is a personal question. With all the changing demographics and in the military, a lot of people just have partners. Maybe it's a partner, not a spouse. Does the terminology need to change, do you think? I mean, is there anything that perhaps would be more inclusive that may appeal to a broader audience by changing maybe the term from spouse program to something else?
That's a really good question, and that's something that we're actually debating right now in our spouses program at Little Rock, because we have a couple of commanders who are not married, but they have a partner. And technically in our current bylaws and constitution, they're not allowed to participate in our spouses program. You have to be active duty or retired to be involved in the program. So that may be something that really needs to be reviewed today to see how they could participate.
Was there another question?
So this is something that we've been working on for over a year at our base, and I'm really happy to say we've changed the kind of dynamic of our spouses club. I actually have 2 board members who are males on my board, and I really wanted that so that could be the face of our spouses club. It could show inclusiveness, and it would show other male military spouses come out, be involved, and do things. It's one of those things, though, that's going to be a challenge because predominantly we have female spouses. But because our environment, is changing and we are having more male spouses, it's really taking that inclusiveness. And for our club, we don't do things anymore that are just for women. So we don't do like a spa day. We don't do anything like that. We try to pick monthly socials that are would be enjoyed by a male or a female spouse. So like we do trivia night and different things like that. So we just don't do crafts or topics like that so that we can reach our male spouses and get them out. And honestly, we have one male spouse on my board. He bakes everything for us, and it's phenomenal. It's like the best thing ever. And so that's something that he loves to do, and he's created a sub club for that. And we have another spouse. I don't know if you're familiar with like Macho Spouse and things like that. There's national groups for male military spouses. So kind of reaching out to them, getting some ideas. There's podcasts out there, ideas, but it's really going, have your spouse go and say, like, I want to be involved, and these are the things that I like. And more often than not, they will have a subgroup or a sub-club that can be created for people like-minded that he, things he wants to do.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So 2 years ago, when I took over as the president of our Spouses Club, or a year and a half ago, it was on the table to be disbanded. It was completely ready to be shut down, and I was asked by the command if I would take over and save the program. So we literally had 0 people in the club. Today we have about 90 in the club. So it is slow growth, but one of the things we did is we consolidated. So we're completely consolidated. Our dues, we try to keep them as low as we possibly can. We try to do activities that are very cost-effective activities. Thankfully for our base, we have a community council right outside our base that's part of our community. We reach out to them and help if we need, a location to utilize so that we can keep the cost down. We don't have to rent a location. Maybe if we're trying to do something to have a door prize. So we reach out to find those resources to keep our costs down. And then we also have really changed our club from being just this social organization to getting back to the roots of being philanthropic. So we do book drives for the hospitals in town, the children's hospital, because we know they serve all of the kids that are at our base. We do a food drive so we can stock our food pantry on base. And we found that doing these types of activities where it was not like a monthly thing, it was just an event that we were doing and we were seeking volunteers. Once the volunteer came and got to know some of the fellow spouses, they were hooked. They wanted to come back. They wanted to come to another event. So turning from it being just this social thing, we know cattiness comes out. We don't tolerate any of that for our base. And we really try to be the resource. So for me, when I got there, it was important to go directly to the AFRC, to go to FSS services, ITT. I went and introduced myself. I went and spoke at First Shirt Council, Top 3, Rising 6, introduced myself and said, this is what we're doing. We want to give back to our spouses. We want to help bridge this communication gap. And that was the key for us. FSS and AFRC was having a hard time getting the information out. Well, we had really great social media, and not just great social media. I mean, we knew algorithms. We knew when to post, if it needed to be a picture, if it needed to be a video, how to reach our population, how to target them. And so by doing that and by becoming this resource, what we did is we linked our club to know everything that was going on base. So now a spouse no longer had to follow 18 Facebook pages, to know what was going on. They could go directly to our website. We listed everything that was going on, and so one-stop shop. They know what's going on, communication piece. So then we got the buy-in because we had the communication that they wanted. So we fixed that problem.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been great discussion. I apologize, we started a few minutes late, and now we've run over a few minutes. So I just wanted to say thank you again so much to our Spouse of the Year, Brittany, and for all of you in attendance today. And hopefully we'll see you tonight at the Air Force's 70th birthday dinner. So thanks again.